Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday, the 4th of January 2020. We need to make sure we get that one right, and you're joining myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. So Happy New Year, Phil. You okay?
Happy New Year to you as well, Curtis, and Happy New Year, everybody that's listening this morning. So, yeah, 2020, we need to make sure we get that one right now. So we're at the end of the decade. Been an interesting one. I think already you're feeling it, and I'm probably feeling the same. That where's that Christmas and New Year gone, and it's back to normal. It doesn't feel like there's been a break, does there?
Yeah, and so it's first week back, and we've got quite a few headlines to actually get through. Quite a bit happened over the break, and just the first few days back. So plenty to cover.
Yeah. We're conscious to try and keep it fairly brief today. You know that we had that long one, didn't we, with Dash Cup to just before Christmas. So if you haven't listened to that, we did a final podcast just before Christmas, and we had Dash Cup to on and his CFO Richard, who they talked around their latest acquisitions, and the Volvo one you would have seen now did go through at the very last minute. So that was our
exclusive,
yeah,
Phil.
Right up to the death, there was a further acquisition right at the last thing there, just before Christmas Eve. So if you haven't listened to it, it's worth a listen, and we'll try and keep this brief this week, and hopefully next week we'll have Andy Condy will be joining us, and myself and Andy will be having a quick look back at 2019 and what 2020 may look like going forward. So again, conscious that there's a lot of people still on holiday and still probably got a lot of sore heads, and up in Scotland I think they'll be celebrating until about mid-February, is it, I think, Curtis?
Oh, at least, yeah. So headlines this week. AM have been very busy over the break, so we'll kick off with a couple of headlines from AM. But the headlines are: survey shows car dealer confidence set to improve, which is probably a good way to kick off the show. December used car market strongest since 2012, says CAP. Leadership changes at Car Shop. We've got an update on Jardine Motors' investment in EV infrastructure. And finally, this week is probably the story of the week. Let's be honest. We've got an update on Carlos Ghosn. So although, having said that, there'll probably be a further update by the time we broadcast.
I was going to say, I don't think this will be the final one, will it? I think,
no.
Yeah, this is potentially one of the big stories for 2019. It's certainly kicked off 2020, hasn't it? So
it's a story that's going to run and run, much like Carlos himself.
Yes, exactly. So we have got the first one, and this is, as you say, it's in AM, and the survey shows car dealer confidence set to improve. And I think a lot of this is on the back of the election result that we did talk about just after the election there, and that there's a bit of confidence creeping back into the dealer network, wasn't there?
Yes, yeah. So we've actually got two surveys covered in this story. So if I kick off with Close Brothers Motor Finance, their research. So they conducted a dealer satisfaction survey and found that 96% of retailers were confident about business prospects going into 2020, with 58% saying they were very confident. So that's the sort of upbeat story that we like to kick the new year off with. The survey also found that 14% expect more stability for their business in 2020, and 12% want to expand into offering new types of vehicles as consumer demand shifts, which I guess is alluding to EVs, which is something we'll pick up later on in the show. Brexit, that was seen as an opportunity by 13% of the respondents, and was viewed as the biggest threat for 2020 by 47%, which is a bit of a curious outcome, because you'd think now that we know what's happening with Brexit, the deadline's looming at the end of the month, there'd be a bit more confidence. So let's see how that pans out over the coming months. But there's also some input from Cox Automotive on this one, isn't there, Phil?
There is, and I think you're right. I think that both Dash Gupta and Mark Lavery, on those two recent interviews, they mentioned the Brexit, didn't they? And it was about the clarity and the certainty that they felt would return the confidence. And Mike Allen from Zeus Capital said the same, didn't he? So I think It's more about the certainty and the clarity around it now, rather than the Brexit in or out situation that seems to be. They looked at the dealer network. They talked first about how the dealers would describe 2019, which would be interesting, and 58% reported that it was worse than they did anticipate, with a fifth saying that actually it was better than they anticipated. So obviously some of the dealer network went into 2019 expecting it to be worse than it actually was, and I think it's a bit of a tale of two halves into it. 2019 we started pretty strong and finished a little bit weak for others, but some did perform. But again, looking out at 2020, so they were looking at where the market, the field would go, and I think there was a bit of confidence on that. I think that looking ahead at 2020, that another challenging year, and the minus 1.3% fall in registrations is what we year on year up until March is what we've been forecasting. But it was positive, I think, that we saw 52% of the dealers surveyed were optimistic about consumer confidence in 2020. So again, getting that clarity, getting that confidence back into the consumer network, and it'll be interesting to see what the consumer index does for December, if we start to get away from that double digit, that minus 14 points that we're on at the minute. But again, a lot of discussion at the minute in the network around pre-reg activity. There's been a lot of pre-reg activity throughout 2019, a lot of pushback from dealers saying that the market can't sustain the level of pre-reg activity. So again, I think we're going to start to see a little bit of that come out now, a lot of pressure on the dealers as they've sort of come out of the second half of 2019 with pressure from pre-reg activity. And, a lot of the dealers have been talking over the Christmas break where, it's always questionable around the cars that haven't been sold or that the manufacturer have overproduced, and those are the cars that are available, and those are the ones that they end up registering and passing the risk onto the dealers as pre-reg cars. So again, I think we'll start to see some of that. But I think positively, 2019 has been a challenging year for some, not everybody. Quite a few headwinds. Positively, hopefully, we are looking at a more positive start to 2020. So let's fingers crossed that we start off well.
Yeah, and we've got another upbeat story, which is also from AM, with the headline, December used car market strongest since 2012, says CAP HPI. So this is their analysis of trends over the course of December, and they found average values at 3 years, 60,000 miles fell just 0.2% during what is, after all, traditionally the quietest month of the year for the market. And they found cars and super minis increased in average value by around £50. Sorry, that was city cars and super minis. So they increased by around £50. And according to Darren Martin, head of valuations at CAP HPI, this was mainly due to the price alignment that we saw over the course of the summer, and also an inconsistent new car market and steady consumer demand.
No, and again, it's good news for December. I know that December's always a bit of an interesting month, with it being a short month with the Christmas period and everything else going on. But again, positive start for the end of the positive result for the end of the year, and obviously reflecting the positiveness for the dealer network going into 2020. So again, we start to see hopefully some strength returning to that used car market, and hopefully we'll start to see supply return as well, because obviously supply has been fairly limited throughout 2019.
Yes, yeah.
And then the next story is an interesting one. This sort of this is from, again, AM Online, and that's with Tom Sharp there, that's been doing a little bit of research into this, and this is their findings into it on AM Online, and this is leadership changes at Sittner's Group car shop used car division, and I don't think there's anybody actually spoken to them, has there, on this one? I don't think.
No, it's an interesting one, this, because AM broke this story on the 23rd of December, and it was followed the following day by car dealers. So it's that time of the year when, of course, it's very difficult to get hold of people for comments. So they went onto Companies House and found that both Jonathan Dunkley and Brian Scott's appointments at Car Shop had actually ended. So we've got to hear the full outcome of this story, but it does rather look as though Chief Executive Jonathan Dunkley and Chief Financial Officer Brian Scott have moved on there.
Yeah, and they say in a source said that Jonathan Dunkley, James Dunkley, Commercial Director, and Brian Scott have left Car Shop with immediate effect. So again, like I say, this is a bit of research from Tom there at AM, that they say he's been looking at Companies House and things like that. But I presume at some point there will be a statement from Sittner to tell you what has happened.
And it's worth pointing out that they were part of the original Car Shop team. So when Sittner acquired the business back in 2017, they continued with Car Shop, and that's been a big success story for Sittner, because it's significantly increased their multi-brand operations and indeed the group's turnover, propelling them to the number one group in the country.
Yeah, and as we know, just last month that they launched their business and the driving service centre concept when it opens the doors at its 10th car shop site in Bristol. So again, we've seen significant growth from these guys over the recent years, particularly in that supermarket sector, haven't we?
Yes, yeah. So you're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with EB Motors Group, the only weekly podcast serving the car retailing sector, and available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Deezer, SoundCloud, and YouTube.
So, and the next story, this is an interesting one, because again, EV has been talked about a lot recently, and there's been a lot of stories coming out over the Christmas and New Year period around the 2020, the year for EV, some of the negative media around EV, but I think this is fairly positive from a dealer perspective, and this is a story on motortrader.com, and they're talking about where Jardine Motor Group have spent 2.5 million on EV charging infrastructure, and this isn't they've just spent it. This has been over a period of time. They have been investing in that infrastructure for that EV support for their dealer network, haven't they?
Yes, yeah, it's an interesting story, this, and I suspect we'll be covering very similar stories over the coming months as the market really does start to ramp up its preparation for EVs. As we've said on the podcast before, we'll be seeing a lot more EVs coming out from the manufacturers this year, and that's largely driven by changes in legislation. They've basically got to sell more EVs to get their average CO2 emissions down. So we'll be seeing more products coming through the system, and the dealer groups have obviously got to prepare accordingly. So Jardine are sort of ramping up in preparation there.
They have, and there's been a lot of work from the NFDA. They've got their EV electric vehicle approved scheme that they've rolled out across the dealer network. It's been well received by the dealer network. This is a scheme that they're working with the government on, with the NFDA through the dealers. So again, a lot of support being given to the dealer network for investment, when to invest, what to invest in, and things like that, because you can very quickly invest a lot of money on today's technology and infrastructure that could be soon out of date. And it's a case of getting that right strategy and that right investment correct. And again, these dealers are working very closely with people like the NFDA on it.
Yes, and you know what? Anecdotally, I'm hearing a lot more people talking about buying EV, or certainly considering EV as their next purchase. And these aren't necessarily people who are into cars. It's just that the message is getting out there. And I think people are starting to think about sort of future-proofing their next car investment, and whether they go EV or hybrid as a step towards that.
No, you're right. And I think, again, a lot of it is obviously about the training within the dealer network. It's about that future preparation, the infrastructure needing, the charging, the energy solution, the commercial modeling, and how you combine that with the e-commerce. There's a lot of time put into that sort of again, the knowledge, because consumers are wanting to go into that dealer network and they expect that dealer to know all about that sector, what they should be buying, etc., etc. So again, a lot of time, a lot of effort going in there. And I think, as you say, it's starting to pay off now. So I think we're going to start to see. We already talked about it, haven't we, on the podcast, where we're going to see a big influx of EVs throughout sort of 2020 and 2021 coming from the manufacturers. So again, that creates more product, more competition, better for pricing, and again will potentially start to increase the used car marketplace for EVs as well. So again, a lot of learning to take place, but a lot of investment as well.
Yes.
And then we've got the big and finally.
The big one, yes.
Yeah. This is it's picked the news story on this one, hasn't it? Because it's broke pretty heavily across all the large nationals, and we have actually gone with the BBC News headline, and this is where Interpol have issued a red notice for Nissan's ex-boss's arrest, and this is where he's done a flit through a private security company on a private jet.
I mean, there's a couple of stories kicking around at the moment. So the one I particularly like is that I think it was on December the 30th that Carlos Ghosn hosted a dinner party in his house in Japan, and he hired a band. And one of the reports suggests that there was a paramilitary group that were disguised as musicians and spirited Carlos away in a musical instrument box, and got him to the airport and flew him to Beirut via Turkey. So it's I mean, I actually posted something on LinkedIn with this story, saying that if this was, the plot of a box set, a thriller box set, it probably wouldn't get commissioned because it just sounds so implausible. But he's out, and he's in Beirut. He is of Lebanese descent. His parents are Lebanese, so he actually holds a French, Lebanese, and Brazilian passport. And there's lots of stories kicking around at the moment as to how he actually was allowed in, what sort of passport or identification he had, because that was all held in Japan. So this is a story that we'll be hearing more of over the coming weeks and months.
You just couldn't make it up, could you? It's
no.
We've been going through all the Dieselgate with VW and everything else, and then it's kind of, it does question these manufacturers sometimes, doesn't it, with all the arrests and fines and things and everything that we've been talking about over the years on the diesel situation with VW and others. But and this one now that he was under house arrest, and he's done a flirt on a French passport into Lebanon via a private security firm on a jet via a band in an instrument case. But anyway, again, it would, like you say, it would make a fantastic Netflix drama probably at some point in the future, wouldn't it?
Oh yes, yeah, and then let's not forget, Carlos Ghosn, an absolute titan of the car industry,
Right.
and he whatever he's accused of at the moment, he is the man who turned around Renault and then Nissan, and it's an extraordinary achievement and extraordinary legacy he's got, and what a turn of events seeing Carlos Ghosn and Interpol mentioned in the same headline. I mean, for goodness sake, what's going on?
I know. I mean, even going back to the early stories when they showed images of him in jail, weren't they? In the early ones that we were talked about on the podcast, and it's you didn't expect this to happen, though, did you? To be fair, you couldn't have guessed this one.
No, and he has said that he will give a further press statement. So we sort of eagerly await what he has to say for himself.
So again, very quick one this week, everybody. Trying to get some of those major headlines that happened last minute in 2019 and sort of fairly early on in this week. So again, back to normal next week with a few more headlines, and hopefully, I say, we'll be looking at a 2019 review and a 2020 outlook, as well as the headlines of the week as well. So please tune in as normal again next week. But again, good interview with Dash Gupta just before Christmas there. If you've got time, have a listen to that. And again, where can we be found, Curtis?
Oh, we can be found on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Deezer, SoundCloud, and YouTube.
So again, you've been listening to the Motor Trade Radio in association with eBay Motor Group, and it's the only weekly podcast serving the car retailing sector. So again, thanks for tuning in, and have a great weekend, everybody.
Yeah, many thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch up with you next week.